The storm was wild that night. Snow fell heavy from the sky. The wind howled through the empty mining road like a beast searching for prey. Rayan pulled his coat tighter. His boots crunched against the frozen ground. He had finished his late repair shift at the station, and he only wanted to reach the small hut he called home. But fate had other plans. Through the blur of snow, he saw something strange. He thought it was only a pile of broken crates, maybe tossed aside by the wind, but then he saw a hand, small and thin, sticking out from behind the wood. His heart jumped. He hurried closer. And what he found nearly stopped his breath. It was a girl, not human. Her skin had turned blue. Not the blue of healthy blood, but the blue of deadly cold. She was curled into herself, shivering so hard her teeth clicked together. Her clothes were thin, torn in places, hardly enough to keep her alive in such a storm. Her silver eyes blinked weakly. And when they saw him, they begged without words. Rayan knelt beside her. Snow stung his face as he pulled her up. Her body felt as light as a bundle of sticks. He could feel the ice on her skin even through his gloves. "Easy, easy," he whispered. Though he did not know if she could understand, the girl's lips parted. A faint sound came. One word, warm. That single word broke his heart. He looked around. The road was empty. No one else would help her. The law said aliens like her had no rights here. The foreman paid bounties to those who turned them in. But Rayan could not walk away. He could not leave her to die in the snow. He pulled off his thick coat and wrapped it around her. His chest burned from the bite of cold. But he held her close and carried her in his arms. She was shivering less now, but her skin was still icy. He had to find shelter fast. Not far down the road was an old service shed. Broken windows covered with metal sheets, half buried in snow. Rayan kicked the door open and stepped inside. The air was dark and freezing, but at least the wind stayed out. He lowered the girl to the floor gently. Her eyes fluttered. She was still conscious, but only barely. There was a small heater in the corner, rusted and dead for years. Rayan tore wires from his repair kit and struck a spark. The heater coughed, sputtered, and finally a small orange flame came to life. The weak heat spread slowly through the room. The girl leaned toward it, her lips trembling warm. She whispered again, and Rayan smiled. "I got you," he said softly. He melted snow in an old metal cup, held it to her mouth. She sipped. Weakly, her hands were shaking, but she held on, her eyes never leaving his face, as if trying to understand why this human was helping her. The storm outside grew louder. The shed shook with the force of the wind, but inside was a small circle of light, a fragile hope. Rayan kept feeding wire to the heater. The girl's breathing grew steadier. Some of the blue in her skin faded toward gray. She was not safe yet, but she was alive. Then came the sound, a low humming. Not from the storm, but from the sky. Rayan froze. He knew that sound too well. Search drones, their lights cut through the snow outside. Long white beams sweeping across the road. If they found the girl, they would take her, and he would be punished. Rayan quickly shut the heater. The flame died, the warmth vanished. The girl whimpered and curled into his coat. Her small hands clutched his arm. Her body shook again from the sudden cold. He held her close, his heart racing. The beams of light crawled across the walls of the shed. Thin blades of brightness slipped through the cracks of the old wood. The sound of the drone grew closer. One passed directly over the roof. The vibration shook the rusted tin. Rayan held his breath. He could feel the girl's breath too, shallow and weak against his chest. He thought of leaving her, of pushing her outside, letting the drones take her. It would mean safety for him. No punishment, no risk. But then he looked down at her, her silver eyes half open, staring at him with silent trust. She was too young, too helpless. And she had already spoken the one word that bound him. Warm Rayon clenched his jaw. "Not tonight," he muttered. He pulled her closer, her body trembling inside his coat. He would not give her up, not to the storm, not to the drones, not to the cold world that wanted her gone. The hum outside stopped. A soft metallic tap landed on the shed door. His blood ran cold. The drone was right there. A voice, flat and empty, echoed from a speaker. "Sheltering unauthorized off-world life is a violation. Open this door." The girl's eyes widened. She tried to sit, but her strength failed. She whispered again, "Warm." Her hand reached out and slipped something into Rayon's palm. A pendant, small and glowing faintly. It pulsed with soft light. Rayon stared at it, confused, but there was no time. The knock came again, harder this time. The door rattled. Snow blew through the cracks. The storm screamed behind the drone's machine voice. Rayon gripped the pendant tight. Its warmth spread into his skin. His other hand reached for the only weapon he had, a wrench from his belt. The wood of the door creaked. The lock would not hold for long. The girl's weak voice rose again. Just one word. The only word she seemed to know. "Warm," she begged, her silver eyes fixed on him. Trusting him with everything, Rayon pressed his forehead against the door. His breath fogged in the cold air. He whispered to himself, "All right." Then he whispered to her, "I'll keep you warm, no matter what." The drone's light sliced through the cracks once more. The door shook under the weight of their command. Rayon raised the wrench in one hand, the pendant glowing in the other, and as the hinges groaned and the storm howled louder, he prepared to face whatever came through that door. The fire crackled in the small cabin, throwing warm light across the wooden walls. The human sat close to the flames, his eyes fixed on the alien girl who still lay wrapped in his coat. Her breathing was slow, but steadier than before, a faint rise and fall in her chest, proving that life had not yet left her. He rubbed his hands together, then leaned forward to check if the fire was strong enough. It had to be, because the fire was now her lifeline. The storm outside screamed like a beast denied its prey. Winds battered the wooden cabin, but inside, the fire pushed back against the dark. He took a deep breath, sweat mixing with the cold air that slipped through the cracks. Every few moments his eyes went back to the girl. She looked so fragile. Like ice that could shatter at the slightest touch. Her skin no longer glowed blue, but had softened to a pale shade. The strange markings across her body flickered faintly. In rhythm with her heartbeat, he did not know what they meant. Yet they felt important, like scars of history or a secret language. He whispered to himself, "What are you doing here? Why alone in the snow?" But of course, no answer came, only the fire's soft crackle. Suddenly, she stirred, her fingers twitching slightly under the blanket. Her lips moved, and he leaned closer. Her voice came out soft, broken, like a child. Learning to speak again. "Where am I?" "You're safe," he said, his voice low but steady. "You were freezing out there. I brought you here. The fire will keep you alive." She blinked slowly, her silver eyes opening halfway. They were wide, bright, but filled with disbelief. Her gaze locked on him as if trying to understand why he sat there, watching her. "You." "Human," she whispered, the word heavy with both fear and surprise. "Yes," he replied simply, "and you're alive because of me." Her brow furrowed, confusion dancing across her face. "No human should touch me," she whispered. Again, though weaker this time, the human shook his head. Leaning closer to place another log on the fire, "You can tell me what rules your people live by later. Right now, it's just us, and you need warmth." Her eyes flickered as though she wanted to argue, but her strength gave way. Her head sank back into the blanket, her body trembling slightly. He leaned forward, holding out his hand carefully. Not to scare her, you don't have to be afraid. I'm not your enemy, for a long moment. The only sound was the storm outside and the fire inside. Then her lips parted once more, and words escaped like secrets forced into the open. They left me to die. The human froze, his hands still in the air, her voice cracked, her eyes glassy as if she saw that night all over again. My family. They said I was weak blood, not worthy. They abandoned me in the snow. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Shining briefly before the firelight dried them away, the human clenched his jaw, his chest heavy with anger at the thought. How could anyone leave their own child, their own kin, to freeze to death? He reached forward and gently placed his hand on hers. She flinched at the touch, but he did not let go. His hand was warm, steady, grounding her in a way she had never known. You're not weak, he said softly. You're still breathing. That's strength enough. Her eyes widened at his words, as if no one had ever spoken them to her before. The firelight reflected in her gaze, mixing with the faint glow of her markings. For the first time, she did not look afraid of him. She opened her mouth again, her voice trembling like a candle in the wind. If my people find me, they will kill you too. The human leaned back and gave a small shrug, as though it did not matter. Let them come, he said, his tone calm but filled with a quiet defiance. I won't throw you back into the cold. Her lips parted in shock, and for a heartbeat, she forgot to breathe. This human was unlike anything she had ever been told. Her people had always said humans were selfish, brutal, and untrustworthy. Yet here was one who had risked his life to carry her, wrapped her in his coat, and now swore to protect her. A strange warmth grew inside her, deeper than the fires. Glow. It was something she had never felt before. Safety. Her body relaxed, though her heart raced. The storm outside raged louder, but in the cabin, silence stretched between them. Finally, her eyes drifted closed again, sleep claiming her, but this time she slept not in fear of death, but in the fragile peace of knowing someone was watching over her. The human sat by the fire, staring at the flames. He did not know why he cared so much, why he had risked everything. For her, maybe it was the way her silver eyes pleaded silently. Maybe it was the injustice of her story. Or maybe, just maybe, he could not stand the thought of being the kind of man who walked away. He leaned back, closing his tired eyes for a moment, but even as sleep threatened to pull him under, he kept one hand close to her, ready to hold her again if the cold tried to steal her life. The fire burned brighter, pushing back against the storm. And in that small cabin, two lives, one human, one alien, had become tied together by warmth, by defiance, by something unspoken that was only just beginning. The fire had burned through the night, filling the cabin with its warmth. When the human finally opened his eyes, the storm outside had calmed, leaving only a world of white silence. He stretched his arms, sore from carrying her through the blizzard, and turned to check on the alien girl. She was still asleep, wrapped tightly in his coat and blanket, her breathing calm and steady. For the first time since he found her, she looked peaceful, but peace never lasted long in his world. He stood and stepped quietly to the window, brushing away a thin layer of frost. The forest beyond the cabin was buried in snow, trees heavy under the weight of ice. It looked calm, and his instincts screamed that danger was near. He let the frost fall from his fingers and tightened his grip on the old weapon hanging by the door. A faint sound broke the silence, not the crack of branches from falling snow, not the whistle of wind. It was a low hum, steady, mechanical, echoing faintly through the air. His chest tightened because he knew that sound. Trackers. He turned back quickly, but the girl was already awake, her silver eyes wide with fear. They found me, she whispered, her voice trembling. Her hands clutched the blanket as though it could hide her from the world. The human frowned. Who? My people. She answered, shaking her head. They will not let me live. And if they find me with you, you will not live either. He stepped closer, lowering himself to meet her gaze. Then tell me everything, he said firmly. Why are they hunting you? Tears welled in her eyes as her lips trembled. Because I am a mistake. She whispered, born with weak blood. My father is of the ruling line, but my mother, she was not. To them, I am a shame, a danger to their pride. Her voice cracked. Raw with pain, they left me to die so no one would remember me. The human clenched his fists, anger burning hotter than the fire, to abandon their own child. That's not strength. That's cowardice. She stared at him in shock, her chest rising quickly. You speak as if I matter. She whispered. He nodded without hesitation. Because you do. To me, you do. Her lips parted, but no words came. She could not understand. How a stranger, a human of all beings, spoke with more care for her life than her own bloodline ever had. Her heart pounded. And in that silence, she realized something terrifying if she let herself believe his words. She might never want to leave his side, but then the sound outside grew louder, the hum of engines cutting through the forest. She gasped, clutching his arm. You must. Let me go. If they find me here, they will kill us both. Please, leave me outside. Pretend you never saw me. The human pulled his arm free, but not to push her away. Instead, he reached for his weapon and checked the charge. I won't, he said simply, his voice calm but solid as stone. I won't throw you back into the cold. She shook her head desperately. You don't understand. They are not like you. They hunt without mercy. They will burn this cabin to the ground. They will destroy everything to erase me. The human's jaw tightened, his eyes sharp. Let them try, he muttered. I've faced worse than snow. And shadows, the alien girl stared at him, her hands trembling against the blanket. Her people had taught her humans were weak, desperate creatures who survived by luck. But this one stood tall, unshaken even as danger closed in her heart. Raced, not from fear, but from the strange warmth his words stirred within her. The hum outside faded for a moment, replaced by silence. Then came another sound. Faint but sharp, a distant howl, followed by the metallic click of something scanning through the trees. She flinched, recognizing it instantly. They're close, she whispered. Too close. The human walked to the fire, picking up a burning log and pressing it into the hearth until sparks flared. He glanced back at her, his face lit by the flames. Stay near the fire. Don't move until I tell you. Her voice trembled. And if you don't come back. He smiled faintly, though his eyes remained cold. Then you'll know I died making sure you lived. Her chest ached at those words. No one had ever risked anything for her, let alone their life. She wanted to scream, to beg him not to go. But her voice broke before it could escape. Instead, she whispered, barely audible, please, human, don't leave me. He hesitated at the door, his hand on the wooden frame. For a moment, he looked back at her, her silver eyes glistening with tears. Then he gave a small nod. I won't, not while you still need me, outside the forest. Waited, silent but full of hidden dangers. The snow crunched under his boots as he stepped into the cold once more. Weapon in hand, the hum of engines grew louder again, circling the area. Shadows moved among the trees. Hunters sweeping the woods for any trace of the girl inside the cabin. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, her body trembling not from cold, but from fear of losing him. The firelight flickered across her markings, glowing faintly as though reacting to her heartbeat. She whispered into the flames, why do you care for me, human? "Why do you fight for me?" The fire gave no answer. But in her heart, she already knew, because he was different, because he saw her not as a burden, not as a shame, but as someone worth saving. And as the storm clouds gathered again above the frozen land, the girl realized a terrifying truth. If her people did not kill him, her own heart might betray her first, because in the warmth of his defiance, she was beginning to feel something she had never felt before: hope. The night had returned, and with it came the silence of a world holding its breath. The cabin stood alone in the endless snow, its fire burning steady. Yet outside, shadows crept closer. The humans sat by the door, weapon in hand, listening. Every sound mattered now. Every crack of ice, every snap of a branch. He could feel the presence of hunters out there, watching, waiting inside. The alien girl hugged the blanket around her shoulders. Her silver eyes locked on him. She wanted to speak, to beg him again to let her go, but fear tied her tongue. Her heart pounded louder than the storm outside. Each flicker of firelight revealed the sharp angles of his face. Calm but ready. She thought he looked like a statue carved from stone, unshaken even when death was near. Then it came, a soft thud against the snow. Slow and deliberate, he raised a hand, signaling her to stay silent. His weapon lifted slightly, the old metal groaning as it adjusted. The fire crackled, too loud in the tense air. Another thud followed, then another. Voices, muffled but sharp, drifted from the trees. The girl's body stiffened, her markings glowing faintly against her skin as her fear rose. "They're here," she whispered, her lips barely moving. He nodded once, his eyes narrowing toward the door. The shadows grew longer against the window, strange figures passing in the night. A beam of light swept across the snow, slow and searching. The human's grip tightened on his weapon, his jaw locked like iron. The girl pressed a trembling hand over her mouth, praying they would pass by, but deep inside she knew they would not. A knock echoed through the cabin. It was not gentle, but heavy, demanding. The door shuddered under the force. The girl's silver eyes widened, panic flashing through them. "They know," she gasped. "They found me." The human rose slowly, his boots thudding against the floorboards. He stood tall before the door, his shadow stretching across the cabin. The knock came again, harder this time, followed by a metallic voice, open, human. "This is not your concern." Hand over the girl. The girl's body shook violently, her breath quick and shallow. She pulled the blanket higher, curling into herself. Her mind screamed for him to open the door, to give her away, to live, but her heart begged for something else. Her heart begged him to stand firm, to choose her. The human's voice cut through the cabin, steady as stone. "You'll find nothing here," he called. The voice outside hissed like metal grinding on stone. "We know she is inside. Step aside or freeze with her." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him to run, but no words came. The firelight glowed brighter, throwing sparks as though sensing the tension. The human turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze for a heartbeat. The world fell silent, and only his eyes spoke. "Trust me." The door rattled violently, fists pounding against it. The hunters outside had lost patience. Shadows crossed the windows, dark shapes pressing against the fragile wood. The girl gasped, whispering, "They will break through." The human nodded once, raising his weapon. "Then we'll be ready." Suddenly, the wall shook as something heavy slammed against it. Dust fell from the ceiling, the old cabin groaning under the assault. The girl pressed her hands against her ears, her silver eyes glowing brighter. Her markings burned like firelight, reacting to the danger. She whispered a word in her own tongue, one he did not understand, but he did not need to. He knew it was a prayer. The hunters spoke again, their voices cruel and sharp. Last chance, human. Surrender her, and you may live." The human smirked faintly. Though his eyes remained like ice, "She's under my roof now," he replied, his voice low but filled with defiance. "You'll have to kill me first." The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. It was the silence of predators. Ready to strike, the girl's body trembled, every muscle tight with fear, yet deep in her heart, she felt something else, something stronger than fear-hope. The door shuddered again, then split slightly at the edge. Cold wind tore into the cabin, sending sparks flying from the fire. The human stood firm, weapon raised, his shadow tall against the flickering flames. The girl watched him, her heart torn between terror and awe for the first time in her life. Someone was willing to fight for her. Outside, the hunters moved into position. Their shadows thickened. Their engines hummed like beasts, ready to strike. Snow crunched under their boots. Closer, closer. The human whispered without looking back. "Stay by the fire. Don't move." She swallowed hard, tears slipping down her cheeks. Her lips parted to say the words she had been afraid to speak. "Please. Come back to me," she whispered. He gave no answer, but his stance told her everything. He was not going to give her up, no matter the cost. Then, with one final crash, the door gave way. Shadows poured into the cabin, tall and merciless. The human pulled the trigger, the weapon roaring like thunder. The firelight flared, the girl screamed, and the battle for her life began. The cabin door hung broken, smoke and ash rising from the fire that had nearly gone out. The human stood in the wreckage, his chest heaving. Weapons still warm in his grip, shadows lay scattered in the snow outside, the first wave of hunters beaten. Back, but he knew it was only the beginning. More would come, stronger. And they would not stop until they had her. The alien girl sat trembling near the fire, her silver eyes wide with fear. Her markings glowed faintly, pulsing like the rhythm of her frightened heart. She whispered, "You should not have done this. You should have left me." The human turned toward her, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "I'm not the kind of man who leaves anyone to die," he said firmly. "Now we have to move." She shook her head, clutching the blanket tighter. "They'll hunt us. They'll never stop." He walked closer, kneeling so his eyes met hers. "Then let them chase." He said calmly, "I've been hunted before." She stared at him in disbelief, the firelight dancing in her tears. In that moment, she realized he was serious. This human would rather fight the world than abandon her. The storm outside had quieted, leaving the forest eerily still, but in the distance, the low hum of engines returned. The hunters were regrouping, spreading their net wider. He grabbed his pack, slung the weapon over his shoulder, and reached for her. "We can't stay here. They'll burn this place to ash." Her voice cracked. As she whispered, "Where will we go?" He glanced toward the frozen forest, dark and endless, far from here. Into the snow, into the trees. "They'll have to catch us first." Her body trembled as he lifted her into his arms. She felt light, fragile. Yet her warmth seeped against him like a heartbeat of life as he stepped into the snow. The cold bit at his skin, but he ignored it. All that mattered was the girl pressed close to his chest. Her head rested against him, and she whispered faintly, "Why suffer for me?" His answer was quiet but strong, because someone should. They moved through the forest, snow crunching under his boots. The trees loomed tall, their branches heavy with ice. Every shadow felt alive. Every sound felt like an enemy waiting. But he pressed forward, step after step, never slowing, behind them. The hum of engines grew louder, beams of light sweeping through the snow. The hunters were closing in. The girl stirred in his arms, her voice breaking with panic. "They'll find us. They always find me." He shifted her weight, holding her tighter. "Then we'll keep moving until they can't," he said. His words were steady. But his eyes scanned every corner, every tree, searching for a path. Suddenly, a sharp flash of light tore through the forest. A search beam swept across the snow, catching them for a heartbeat. "Run," she gasped. Her voice trembling, the human did not hesitate. His boots slammed against the frozen ground as he darted deeper into the trees. Branches whipped against him, ice cracked underfoot, but he did not stop. He would not stop. The hunters shouted in the distance, their voices cruel and sharp, "Find them. Don't let the human escape with her." The girl buried her face against his chest, her body shaking. She whispered through tears, "You'll die because of me," but his arms only held her tighter, his breath steady despite the weight. "If I die," he said, "it won't be because of you. It will be because I chose to fight." The forest grew darker, the storm clouds gathering again above. Snow began to fall heavier, masking their trail. The human slowed, lowering her gently against the trunk of a great tree. She looked at him in confusion. Why stop? He crouched low, scanning the shadows. "They're too close. If I keep running, they'll catch us. I need to make them lose the trail." Her silver eyes glistened with fear. "You can't fight them all," he smirked faintly, though his eyes were sharp. "I don't need to fight them all. Just enough to buy us time." She shook her head, reaching for his hand with trembling fingers. "Please, don't leave me." He pressed her hand gently against his chest. "Where his heart beat strong, I'm not leaving," he said softly. "I'll always come back." Before she could reply, the sound of footsteps echoed through the trees. Shadows flickered in the falling snow. Beams of light cutting through the dark. The human gripped his weapon, his breath slow and calm. He leaned close to her one last time, whispering, "Stay quiet. No matter what you hear, stay quiet." Her tears slipped down her cheeks, but she nodded. She pulled the blanket tighter and pressed herself against the tree, hiding in its shadow. Then he stepped forward into the snow. His figure melted into the storm, tall and unyielding. The hunters' lights grew brighter, their voices sharper, but he did not falter. For every step he took was not for himself, but for the girl who waited in the dark. Her heart pounded as she clutched the blanket. Every sound outside felt like thunder, every shadow like a predator. She whispered to herself, "Why? Why would a human fight for me?" The fire in her chest answered, even without his voice. Because he was different, because he cared. Because to him, her life mattered. The hunt had begun, and in the frozen forest, one human stood against the darkness, not for glory, not for pride, but for a single fragile life that no one else wanted. And that choice alone made him stronger than any hunter who followed. Snow fell harder now, thick and heavy, swallowing the forest in silence. The human moved through the trees like a shadow, weapon ready, his breath steady even as the cold cut into his lungs. Behind him, the alien girl huddled near the old tree, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Her heart pounded as she tried to stay quiet. Every sound of her breathing feeling too loud, she whispered to herself, "Please. Come back, human." The hunters spread through the forest, their boots crunching on the frozen ground. Beams of light sliced through the snowfall, sweeping across branches and roots. Voices echoed in the night, sharp and cruel. "Find them. The girl cannot escape again." The human crouched low, watching, counting each shadow as it passed. They were too many. Far more than he had faced at the cabin. But retreat was no longer possible. If he ran, they would find her. If he fought, he might die. Yet his choice had already been made. He raised his weapon slowly, the cold metal groaning as it charged. One hunter passed close, his armor glowing faintly under the searchlight. The human's eyes narrowed, finger tightening on the trigger. The weapon roared like thunder, cutting the silence apart. The hunter collapsed into the snow, a scream dying on his lips. The forest erupted. Lights turned, voices shouted, weapons flared with deadly beams. Snow exploded around him as blasts ripped into the ground, but the human moved fast, darting between trees, firing back with precision. Each shot struck true. Each movement planned. The girl covered her ears as the sound echoed through the night. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she forced herself to stay silent. Her whole body shook as she whispered, "Don't die. Please don't die." The hunters advanced in a line, sweeping the forest like wolves driving prey. But this prey did not run. The human struck from the shadows, his figure vanishing and reappearing. He used the storm as his shield, the snow. As his cover, every blast of his weapon lit the forest for an instant, showing the fire in his eyes, a fire that no storm could extinguish. One hunter broke through the trees, too close. The human met him head-on, slamming the butt of his weapon into the alien's chest. Armor cracked. Breath left the hunter's body. Before he could recover, the human drove him into the snow. The fight ending in silence. He grabbed the fallen weapon, now holding two, for a moment. He stood in the storm, armed and unbroken, a lone warrior against the cold. But numbers pressed harder. Blasts tore through the forest. Burning holes in the trees, the human ducked low, his shoulders scraping against ice. Pain shot through him, but he ignored it. He fired back, his face lit by each flash of light. The storm swallowed the screams of those who fell, yet more kept, coming endless shadows in the snow. The girl's silver eyes widened as she saw lights drawing closer to her hiding place. She bit her lip, fear choking her. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Human. They're coming," as if hearing her from across the forest. He turned his head sharply, and then he moved, like a beast unleashed. He cut through the hunters in his path, each shot blazing, each step certain. The snow turned red where the hunters fell, but still he pressed forward, his strength fueled not by hate, but by the promise he had made to keep her safe. Finally, the last shadow near her tree collapsed. He reached her side, his chest heaving, his coat torn, blood dripping faintly down his arm. Her silver eyes filled with tears as she reached out. "You're hurt," she whispered. He shook his head, brushing the blood aside with his sleeve. "Doesn't matter. You're safe." But the battle was not over. A new sound filled the air, heavier, louder. Engines roared above, shaking the ground as a larger ship descended through the storm. Lights swept across the forest, brighter than before. The girls' markings glowed fiercely, fear and despair twisting inside her. "They've sent the commanders," she whispered, trembling. "They won't stop. They'll never stop." The human tightened his grip on his weapon, his eyes burning with defiance. "Then, neither will I," he said, his voice like stone. The ship landed in the snow, its shadow massive against the trees. Dozens of armored figures stepped out, weapons gleaming. The girl gasped, her tears freezing against her cheeks. She whispered, "You can't win against them." But he crouched low beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. His voice was steady, his words unshaken. "I don't need to win. I just need to keep you alive." Her chest ached at those words. She had been called weak, unworthy, disposable. Yet here was a human, bleeding, battered, standing against an army for her. Her hands trembled as she clutched his torn coat, whispering, "Why do you fight so hard for me?" He met her silver eyes, the storm raging around them, "Because no one else will," he answered softly. "And because you deserve more than the cold." The hunters advanced once more, their shadows stretching long across the snow. The human rose, standing tall in the storm. The fire in his chest burned brighter than the ship's lights. And as he faced the enemy, the girl realized something. The cold had once nearly claimed her life, but now, wrapped in the warmth of his defiance, She had found something stronger than fear. She had found hope. The storm raged above, swallowing the forest in a blinding curtain of snow. Engines roared, hunters shouted, weapons burned the night with fire. Yet, in the middle of it all, the human stood, blood on his coat, determination in his eyes. Beside him, the alien girl trembled, her silver eyes glowing with fear and something deeper, something new. Hope. The hunters advanced in formation, their armor glinting under the ship's light. Their leader stepped forward, a tall figure with a voice. Like ice, you cannot keep her, human. She is ours by law, ours by blood. Hand her over, and we may let you live. The human raised his weapon, his voice calm but sharp as steel. She's not yours anymore, the leader hissed. Motioning for his soldiers to strike, blasts of light tore through the snow, thunder. Rolling across the forest, the human moved with fierce resolve, every shot of his weapon echoing defiance. He struck fast, forcing the hunters to scatter. Using the storm to mask his movements, the girl cried out softly, her heart breaking with each wound he took. She wanted to run to him, but her legs trembled, her body too weak through the chaos. She pressed her glowing hands together. Whispers of her native tongue fell from her lips. The markings on her skin flared brighter. Responding to her desperate will, the human did not see, but something within her awakened, a power her people had abandoned, a strength they had denied her. Her silver eyes shone as she whispered, not weak, not worthless. Not anymore. The forest shook as her markings glowed like fire under the snow. The hunters staggered, their lights flickering, their machines faltering. Confusion spread through their ranks as she rose slowly, her small frame trembling, but her eyes blazing with newfound fire. The human turned in shock, his breath catching as he saw her standing tall for a moment. She looked like a figure born of the storm itself, fragile yet unstoppable. She raised her trembling hand toward the hunters. A wave of energy burst outward, knocking them back, scattering their formation. The ship's engines roared louder as if straining against the force. Snow and wind swirled wildly around her. Carrying her voice like a song, "You left me to die," she cried. "Ka," her voice breaking with both sorrow and rage, "but I lived. Because someone cared when you did not." The hunters faltered, their leader shouting in anger, "Seize her, end this." But none moved forward, their steps uncertain, their eyes filled with fear of the power they once claimed did not exist. The human rushed to her side, steadying her as her knees buckled. Her energy dimmed, her body weak again, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. He caught her in his arms before she could fall. "You don't have to fight alone," he whispered. Her silver eyes shimmered with tears as she looked at him. "I'm not alone anymore," she breathed. The leader snarled. Stepping forward with his weapon raised, the human lifted his own, aiming straight at the figure. The storm howled louder, lightning flashing across the sky, but before either could strike, the ship's engines faltered completely. The storm swallowed it, snow burying the shadows of the hunters until only silence remained. When it was over, the human stood in the snow, the alien girl cradled against his chest. The forest was quiet again. The only sound, the steady crackle of the storm easing into. Calm, her head rested against his shoulder, her breath warm against his skin. She whispered, her voice soft but clear, "You gave me warmth, not just for my body, but for my heart." He looked down at her, exhausted but smiling faintly. "Then stay by the fire," he said. "I'll keep it burning." He carried her back through the forest, step after step. The storm finally gave way to a quiet dawn. The first light breaking across the horizon, they reached a cave high in the mountain where stone walls shielded them from the wind. There, he set her down gently, lighting a small fire from the dry wood he carried. The flames flickered to life, their glow chasing away the cold. The girl curled close, wrapped in his coat, her silver eyes soft as they reflected the light. For the first time, she felt safe. She reached for his hand, her touch weak but steady. "Why?" she asked again, her voice trembling. "Why suffer so much for me?" He sat beside her, staring into the fire. "Because no one deserves to be left in the cold," he answered quietly. Her tears slipped down her cheeks. But this time, they were not only of sorrow. They carried something gentler. "Something warmer," she whispered. "Then let me stay. Let me stay by your side." He turned his head, meeting her silver eyes, and nodded once. "You already are." The fire burned through the night, its warmth wrapping around them both. The storm outside roared one last time before fading into silence. And in that silence, something new was born. The girl who had been abandoned, called weak and worthless, had found her strength. The man who had walked alone through frozen nights had found someone to protect. Together, they had found warmth, not just against the cold, but in each other. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unforgiving. But for now, in a small cave lit by a single fire, two lives shared one truth. They were no longer alone, and in that fragile, precious warmth, hope began to grow.